Hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever time it is that you're watching this. This is going to be a relatively quick lecture on sleep and your well-being. Sleep is absolutely fundamental to everything else we will talk about in this class. It's almost like the bedrock, pun intended, I didn't make that up on my own, the bedrock of all of your other health behaviors. So if your sleep's not in check, it makes healthy eating, um, stress management, physical activity, relationships, making good, healthy decisions so much more difficult. So let's dive right in. We're going to talk about the physiological underpinnings of sleep. So, why does sleep happen? What does it do? What do we need it for? What controls when and why we sleep? We're also going to look at the health determinants of poor sleep. So, what happens if our sleep is not so hot? We're going to look at behaviors that make our sleep more difficult. And then lastly, we'll talk about some strategies to improve your sleep. And I want to put a few caveats out there before we dive in. One is that I don't mean to be deterministic at all when I share this. I don't mean to be fear inducing or make you think, oh my gosh, I work and I can only get 6 hours of sleep a night, or I have a baby and they wake up multiple times in the night. It's okay. Our sleep is not always going to be perfect. None of our health behaviors are always or ever really going to be perfect. It's just to move you towards healthier sleep. So don't worry if your sleep can't be perfect. You just want to make it the best that you possibly can. And then when we get to these sleep strategies, know that these are research proven tips and methods to help improve your sleep, but different ones will work for different people. Also, I am holed up in my bedroom of all places right now filming this because I am stuck at home today with a plumber and it's very loud out there. So hopefully it's quiet enough in this room that I've blocked off and the noise canceling effects on Zoom work. So why do we sleep and how does it happen? Roughly 1/3 of our living time spent on this earth is spent asleep. So it's clearly pretty important if biology and evolution is willing to dedicate 1/3 of our lives to it. So, what are some of the things that happen while we sleep? Well, these are some of the things that we know about. You can think of the time sleeping as neuronal housekeeping and toxin removal. So, what the heck do I mean when I say that? By neuronal housekeeping, I mean that while we sleep, our brain takes care of our neurons. And these are all of the cells that make up our nervous system, our brain, our spinal cord, and all the nerves that run throughout our body that communicate to our body to tell it what to do and that receive input from the environment, letting us know what's going on around us. It's kind of the master control of our entire body, everything that we take in and everything that we put out. And so these nerves are incredibly important. These neurons are incredibly important for everything that we do. And while we sleep, we take care of these neurons. So there are these things called telomeres that are sort of like end caps at the end of a neuron. And these things fray over time with age in relation to oxidative stress. And these are actually repaired while we are sleeping. So sleep is crucial for repairing these neurons. In fact, one theory of aging is that the telomere breakdown increases the effects of aging. And so anything that we can do to preserve telomeres and to preserve neurons will improve and preserve our health long term. So sleep is one of those things. Exercise is another one. And also toxin removal. This helps build up toxic plaque that develops in our brain and central nervous system. And without this removal, it can increase the likelihood of developing things like Alzheimer's and dementia. That's why you'll see a correlation between lack of sleep and the development of Alzheimer's or dementia later in life. Sleep also helps us consolidate memories. So lots of times people will want to cram before a big test the next day and they'll sacrifice sleep to do so. So they might think, okay, I'm just going to stay up till 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning sitting for my test because I haven't had time to study it. And research shows that this is actually not very beneficial because when you miss out on that sleep, you don't get to consolidate the material that you're learning to regurgitate it on your test the next day. So it's much better to study over a period of time before you go to sleep and then use that period of time for sleeping to consolidate your memories. In fact, my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, that when he was in school, he would always study a little bit right before bed and then go to sleep. And he felt it helped him remember the material better. And in fact, research backs that up. And then lastly, sleep impacts every bodily system in a myriad ways. So there are lots of things happening when we sleep that are helping to repair all of our organs and major systems. Now, a couple things to know about sleep. It occurs in stages. We have 5 of them. 4 of these stages occur in non-REM sleep. 1 occurs in REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement. So stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all progressively deeper phases of sleep. 1 is kind of that phase where you're like partially asleep. If something rouses you and wakes you up, you wonder, was I actually asleep or was I awake? Stage 2 is the stage we spend the most time in throughout the night. And again, it's progressively deeper. And then stage 3 and 4 are our most restorative stages of sleep. Now, we cycle through these stages throughout the night in about 90-minute time windows, including all of them. And stage 3 and 4 sleep actually occurs in longer lengths before around midnight. And that's the reason why going to sleep earlier can actually lead to more restorative sleep. So you'll sometimes hear, and you'll actually see in some of our readings, that sleep that happens prior to midnight counts for double the amount of time as sleep that happens after midnight. And I don't know that it's really double, but know that you do have more deeper restorative sleep in that time period. And then REM sleep, the last and final stage, is rapid eye movement. And this is when dreaming occurs. So in non-REM sleep, we see our physiological processes gradually decline. Our breathing rate slows, our heart rate slows, our temperature drops. During REM sleep, we see an increase in activity. And we don't know exactly why that is, but we do know that this is when dreaming occurs. And I don't know the purpose of dreams. There's some theories that perhaps they're ways for your subconscious to deal with circumstances that are happening in your life and try to help you work through them. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what your all thoughts are on it. So, what controls our sleep? What tells us we need to go to sleep? There are 2 major things. One is our circadian rhythm. And you've probably heard of this before. This word gets thrown around a lot. Your circadian rhythm is a 24-hour clock or cycle that regulates your wake and sleep. And it's regulated by a number of hormones and external inputs. So some of these hormones of note are cortisol and melatonin. Now, cortisol is a hormone of arousal. It's often associated with stress, which is true. When you experience stress, you do secrete higher amounts of cortisol, but it's also higher earlier in the morning and gradually decreases throughout the day, or at least it should be. So cortisol helps you wake up, it helps you be more alert, and then as it drops throughout the day, you become sleepier. Now, this can become dysregulated, especially with chronic stress, and that can be one of the reasons why it may be difficult to fall asleep. You may feel wired, but tired at the end of the day, and then feel actually pretty tired and lethargic throughout the day. Melatonin is a sleep-related hormone. It's often associated with sleep, and it does the opposite of cortisol. It should be low in the morning and then peak later in the day. And that's a hormone that helps you feel sleepy. Light and temperature heavily affect these things, particularly light. So melatonin responds to bright lights. So ideally, if you expose yourself to early morning light, first thing when you wake up or shortly after you wake up, you expose your bare eyes without sunglasses to morning light. It helps set your circadian clock for that day. So it'll kind of align your cortisol and melatonin rhythms such that they're at more appropriate levels when you go to sleep. If, on the other hand, you view bright light in the evening, it can disrupt the production of melatonin. And homeostatic regulation is sort of your body's drive to maintain baseline normalcy and health. Homeostasis is just considered when all of your physiological systems and processes are at baseline. And homeostatic regulation encourages sleep drive when you've gone a certain length of time without sleep. So that may be 16 hours or so. That might be why if you take a long nap in the middle of the day, you find it harder to fall asleep at night. Your sleep drive is reduced because it hasn't been as long since you've last slept. Sleep needs. How much sleep do we actually need? So it varies depending on our age. Babies sleep as much as 16 to 18 hours a day. So they're kind of like koala bears in that way. They need a lot of sleep. They're sleeping more than they are awake. And this is broken up into nighttime sleep and then naps throughout the day. Children and teens need about 8 to 10 hours a night, with teens actually needing a bit more. And then adults require 7 to 9 hours for optimal function. However, many of us don't get this amount. Lots of people will say, oh, I do fine on 6 hours. I do fine on 5 hours. And there are few people for whom that is actually true. Oftentimes, people have just gotten used to the feeling of lack of sleep. And we'll see why this is so important when we talk about the health associations with sleep. Generally, sleep requirements and capacity drop with age. So that's why oftentimes older adults will tend to rise very early. They no longer need quite as much sleep, and staying asleep longer becomes more difficult. CDC data shows as of 2016 that 1/3 of US adults get fewer than the minimum requirement of 7 hours per night. And you'll see there are a lot of consequences related to this. Lastly, one thing to bring up is sleep chronotype. And chronotype refers to whether you tend to be more of a morning person or a night owl. So do you like to rise early? Do you feel that you get a lot done early in the day? Or do you tend to like to sleep in and be more productive in the evening? There are actually different chronotypes that exist. Lots of times people are kind of pushed into that. You got to be an early riser and get everything done early in the day, when in fact, that's not the optimal situation for everybody. And now I am a morning person. And so I thought for a long time, everybody should be up and ready to go. And then once evening hits, you can't get a lot out of me. But in fact, lots of folks do better in the evening. They actually peak in terms of creativity and focus and work effort in the evening. And so it would be better for them to sleep in a little bit and structure a life where they were able to do more of their work in the evening. Now, unfortunately, not a lot of jobs are set up this way. Maybe more so now that things are becoming more flexible, but many jobs require people to start at 8 or 9 in the morning. And if you tend to be a night owl type, this can be very difficult for you and actually lead to feelings of perpetual exhaustion. So if possible, figure out your chronotype. You probably know or can guess just by hearing me say this, but there are some reputable self-assessments you can find online to see what your chronotype is. And then whenever possible, see if you can structure your work shifts or your school classes to meet the needs of your personal chronotype. So let's look at the benefits of quality sleep. Sleep is essential for our physical and mental and emotional health. So we already talked about how it consolidates memory and improves learning, how it clears away toxins and plaque and reduces the risk of cognitive decline. It is essential for improving and stabilizing mood. So sleep has a bidirectional relationship with mental health issues. It's a lack of sleep encourages depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. And then depression and anxiety can also make it more difficult to sleep. Sleep impacts decision making. So our eating habits, our behaviors around safety or decisions around safety, and then how likely we are to exercise. It helps us manage our weight, even independent of how much food we eat. So getting poor quality sleep makes you more likely to eat more. It also makes you more likely to reach for high energy foods, foods that are full of sugar and things that are going to give you a quick bump and a quick fix. But even when researchers control for differences in eating habits, sleeping less still increases weight, regardless of the foods that you choose to eat. Benefits of quality sleep include improvements in immune function, so definitely important when you're getting sick or you're around sick folks. And it reduces the development of chronic disease, especially dementia and other diseases related to cognitive decline, but all kinds of chronic lifestyle diseases that we'll talk about later in this class. So what happens if we don't sleep enough? Well, I just mentioned a bit of this, but one of the big things is that it's related to increased weight gain over time. Again, this is independent of the lack of physical activity that's associated with less sleep and the poor eating habits. So it's something about sleeping less that actually increases our weight. It can absolutely worsen stress and mental health. And again, this is kind of a chicken or egg thing. When your mental health is worse, it's harder to sleep. When it's harder to sleep, it worsens your mental health. So if you notice this as a sign or symptom correlated with other mental health concerns, I absolutely encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional. I know they can be ridiculously hard to connect with in America. or to reach out to your medical doctor if you think that medication may be necessary, or if you don't know where to turn, reach out to me and I'll help you make the connections necessary to work on improving your mental health. It increases risks of car crashes and accidental injury. So car crash risk goes up when sleep goes down. Worsens decision making, as we said, and then increases the chronic diseases related to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And one interesting fact is that when we spring forward, when we set our clocks forward once every year, we lose an hour of sleep at night. And that night or the next day, rates of car crashes and rates of heart attacks go up just from that national lack of sleep that everybody gets. So, what are some habits you can take to improve your sleep? Here we go. Let's look at what behaviors impede or get in the way of your sleep first. Big one is altered light viewing patterns. So when you're seeing inappropriate patterns of light in the AM and PM, this means not enough morning light and too much nighttime light. And we are all subject to this right now with technology. So we'll get to the morning light in a second, but in the evening, we have televisions, computers, cell phones constantly barraging us with nighttime light that suppresses melatonin production. And then in the morning, if we don't get our eyes on some sunlight, we don't get that circadian clock set early in the day. So that can actually heavily improve sleep patterns and mental and emotional health. Other things are excessive caffeine or alcohol intake. So lots of folks think that alcohol will help you sleep. Research shows us this is not true. You might fall asleep sooner, but you'll get poorer quality of sleep and you'll be more likely to wake throughout the night. Excessive caffeine intake can raise cortisol, alertness, and other hormones related to alertness. And so caffeine, especially after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for some people even earlier, it depends on how sensitive you are, or over a certain amount, again, it depends on the person, will definitely impact the ability to fall asleep in the evening. Erratic sleep schedule. So falling asleep and waking up at very different times each day. I know it's not possible for everyone to control this, depending on, maybe some nights you work until 10 and some nights you don't work. But as much as possible, keeping your sleep schedule consistent can help you fall asleep more easily and wake up more refreshed. Insufficient physical activity. So if we don't move enough, we may not expend enough energy to sleep well. Stress, difficulty coping, poor mental health. I know lots of folks who, when their head hits the pillow at night, the thoughts start going. So again, we'll look back at those mental health related strategies from last week, and some of them you can even apply right before bed to help you sleep. Lots of times having a brain dump journal helps folks, where they can just jot out all of their feelings right before they go to bed. And you might think, well, then I'm going to be thinking about that. But in fact, writing them down actually helps get them out of your head and onto paper. Poor sleep environment, which we'll look at in a minute, and then the big old late night technology use. So what are the habits that we can actually do to support sound sleep, good sleep? Whenever possible, again, I know it's not always possible, but when you can, view early morning sunlight, get those eyeballs on some sun, ideally outside without sunglasses. Adjust and limit light at night. So if you can keep big overhead lights off and use smaller lamps, or even just use the light on your phone to get around if you need to, that can be helpful. Use blue light blockers if you're on technology. So many phones and laptops have apps that you can download or software developed to make the screen more orange or sepia toned in the evening. That can be easier on your eyes and limit the suppression of melatonin. You can even get these rad little blue light glasses. They look super cool to limit your blue light viewing. One thing is managing nighttime technology use. This is huge, not only because of the blue light, but because it sucks us in and keeps us up until 2 a.m, right? It's really easy to scroll through Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, I think is what the people are using these days, and just get swept up and not realize that a couple of hours have passed. So lots of times students have told me that they'll set alarms on their phone to set times for sleep. They'll charge their phone in a different room, or they'll put their phone on airplane mode at a certain time to limit this. Physical activity will help. For most folks, not right before bed. For some people, it's okay, but most people need a little bit of a break. Find your caffeine and alcohol limit. So it's going to be different for everyone. See, when do you have to cut off caffeine? How much is too much in a day? And if you drink, does one drink or two drinks or how many keep you up at night? Whenever possible, sleep and wake at consistent times, meaning that you try to get to bed around the same time and wake up at the same time. Again, I know when you're in school and working, it's just not always possible. Determine and follow your sleep cycle based on your chronotype whenever possible. Do a brain dump, get a journal, keep a pad of paper next to your bed, use the notes in your phone. And if you have all these thoughts running around your brain, just scroll them out, type them out. If you have something that you remember you need to do tomorrow, write it down so it doesn't keep looping through your brain. Lots of folks find stretching, yoga, or other relaxation before bed helpful. Taking a warm bath or shower can be useful. And in fact, the quiz that you read this week or that you do tells you it's not. Research shows that it is. And it doesn't actually heat your body. It heats your body while you're in it, but after the fact, your body has a cooling response to bring it back down, and it can actually help your body decrease its core temperature in the way that it needs to fall asleep. And then ideally eating a few hours before bed rather than right before bed can be useful, but not going to bed hungry. And then lastly, set up the ideal sleep environment whenever possible. So dark, 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 dark as possible. If you need to throw a sheet or a towel over a window because light seeps in, do it. Cool. The ideal sleeping temperature for most folks is actually between 62 and 68 degrees. Lots of people say this is too cold, and many people don't have the ability to determine the temperature of the room. So keeping a fan on you or a window open when relevant and safe can be useful. Experiment with sound. Some people like it to be completely dark. For some folks, white noise helps. I've even had a student say that listening to Star Wars in the background helps them fall asleep. Make your bedroom a spot for just sleep. So don't do what I'm doing right now and record YouTube videos in your bedroom. Don't do work in your bedroom. Don't try not to eat in your bedroom. Whenever possible, try to make your bed just a spot for sleep. So your brain has an association with, what I do here is sleep rather than what I do here is respond to emails. And lastly, ignoring everything else I just said, just don't stress about it too much. I know, easier said than done, but if you're really having difficulty sleeping, it can be beneficial to get up and do something relaxing for about 20 minutes, read or some other relaxing activity, and then try to get back in bed. Oftentimes, stressing about sleeping makes it more difficult to fall asleep. So that's all we got for sleep. Here are the resources that I used to incorporate these insights. Enjoy reading through the additional resources for this week and watching this week's Sleep TED Talk. I think it's one that you all will rather enjoy. Take care.